It started in the dark in the back seat of his old sedan, parked just off the service road behind the shuttered strip mall where no one ever drove by after midnight. The lot was cracked and weedy, the broken security light overhead blinking on and off like it couldn't decide if it wanted to catch us or let us hide. His hands were shaking as he pushed my thighs apart, the rough calluses on his fingers scraping the soft skin just above my knee. The car smelled like stale coffee and the faint sharp bite of cigarettes. He tried to quit, but never really did. I didn't mean to say stop, but the word slipped out, breathy and weak, the syllable barely hanging in the air between us, before it got swallowed by his groan by the weight of him pushing in deeper, the whole car creaking on its rusted shocks with each thrust. He pressed his forehead to mine, breath ragged, his hair damp with sweat. My arms were pinned tight against my sides by the cramped seat, by the way he'd wedged me back against the door. One knee bent up so high, I felt the door handle dig into the side of my thigh with every movement. I was 39, old enough to know better, old enough to say no and mean it. But I didn't. I felt the heat of him trembling against me, the desperation in the way he held my waist, the raw need in the tiny broken sounds he made when he whispered my name. The windows were fogged over from our breath. Outside, the world was empty and still except for the blinking streetlight and the distant hum of the freeway half a mile away. I told myself I wasn't going to let this happen again, that this time when he texted saying he couldn't stop thinking about me, I'd ignore it, that I'd stay home, hold my husband's hand in the dark while he snored softly beside me, remind myself that the life I'd built was enough. But here I was, my cheek pressed against the cold window glass, eyes squeezed shut, as I felt him pushing so deep it made my breath hitch in my throat. I whispered, "Stop," again, so soft, I barely heard it myself. But my fingers curled in the collar of his shirt anyway, holding him there. He smelled like sweat and rain, and a little bit of engine grease, the same mix I'd noticed the first time I sat beside him in this car, just talking, just laughing at something stupid on the radio. That night felt like 100 years ago now. His breath went rough and ragged, his hips stuttering, and I felt something crack in my chest, a mix of guilt and relief and shame so strong it made me want to scream. "I can't," he whispered, voice breaking. I know, I whispered back, tears sliding hot down my temple into my hair. I thought about my kids asleep in their beds, the homework I'd helped them finish earlier, the plates I'd washed and stacked in the cabinet, so my husband wouldn't complain in the morning. I thought about the promises I'd made to myself the last time this happened. What would you do if the one person you were supposed to protect, the one you were supposed to keep at a distance, polite but firm, was the one who made you feel like you couldn't breathe without them? He trembled against me, his breath catching the car, rocking slightly with every movement. I felt my body clench tight, guilt and heat pulsing so sharp it made me dizzy. When he finally slumped forward, breath shuddering the weight of him pinning me down, I stayed perfectly still. My hands stayed clenched at my sides, afraid that if I moved, I'd pull him closer instead of pushing him away. The streetlight outside blinked back on casting pale light over the fogged windows, catching the streak of tears on my cheek. He kissed my temple once, soft and trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but his hands didn't move from my hips. "I know," I said, voice flat. I never imagined I'd cross this line. Never thought I'd be the woman panting in the back seat of a car, letting another man tremble deep inside her, while I whispered, "Stop," and didn't mean it. But here I was, and I knew even then that I'd do it again. That something in me had already broken something that wouldn't heal, no matter how many times I tried to pretend I was the same woman I'd been before. If you've ever lived with a secret that made you ache and burn at the same time, this story might speak to you more than you'd like. Please like and subscribe. The more you watch, the more stories like this will find others holding back the same truth. Let's begin. I woke before the sun, the room still dark except for the faint glow from the street lamp filtering through the gap in the curtains. My husband was turned away from me, snoring softly, one hand curled under his pillow. I lay there staring at the ceiling arms pinned tight to my sides, barely breathing. My chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out and left empty. I could still feel him, the weight of him in the car, the hot breath against my ear, the way he'd whispered my name right before he broke, trembling so hard I thought the car door might buckle under us. I slid out of bed, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone, and padded into the bathroom. The mirror over the sink showed a woman I barely recognized, hair tangled, eyes puffy and ringed dark from another night of almost no sleep. My lips were raw chapped, from biting them to keep from making noise in the car, the imprint of his rough kisses still lingering in the ache in my jaw. I splashed cold water on my face, scrubbing hard until my skin stung. But no matter how hard I washed, I couldn't scrub away the memory. Downstairs, I started the coffee and stared at the fridge while its brood eyes unfocused the hum of the appliance, the only sound in the kitchen. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I flinched like it had burned me. His name flashed on the screen. "Are you okay?" the message read. I didn't answer. I moved through the morning like I was sleepwalking. I woke the kids, packed their lunches, helped my daughter braid her hair. She looked up at me, frowning. "Mom, your hands are shaking," she said softly. "I'm fine," I whispered, brushing her cheek with trembling fingers. "Just tired." I dropped them off at school and drove home with the radio, off the sound of the tires on the wet pavement too loud in my ears. I kept replaying the night before, in my head the cramped car, the fogged windows, the way I'd whispered, "Stop," but my hands had pulled him closer anyway. I wanted to be disgusted with myself. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt the rush of heat again, the terrible craving that made my stomach tighten. At home, I cleaned the kitchen twice, vacuumed the hallway, folded the towels so neatly the edges lined up perfectly. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, the guilt would crash into me so hard, I thought it would split me open. In the afternoon, my husband texted to say he'd be home late again. Work had piled up. He promised to bring takeout, told me he loved me. I stared at the words, feeling sick. I looked at the clock, counting down the hours until nightfall, until the house was dark and silent, and the guilt would wrap itself around my ribs like a vice. That evening, I went to the grocery store just to get out of the house. I walked the aisles without buying anything, eyes glazed, arms pressed tight against my body. In the parking lot, I saw him leaning against his car watching me. I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Don't," I whispered, walking past him, staring at the ground. "You don't mean that," he said softly, stepping close enough that I could smell the soap on his skin, the faint hint of sweat. I didn't stop. I didn't look at him. I got in my car and drove away, hands shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel steady. That night I lay awake beside my husband, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the rain started to fall, tapping gently against the window. My husband mumbled in his sleep, turning toward me, one arm falling across my stomach. I flinched, holding my breath, afraid he'd somehow feel the guilt burning in my skin, the leftover ache where another man had touched me. I whispered to myself that I wouldn't let it happen again, but even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The days slipped by with an aching slowness. Every morning I woke up before dawn, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband's soft snore beside me. I'd never noticed how steady and safe his breathing sounded, how predictable the gentle rise and fall of his chest felt. Now it only made me feel more like a stranger in my own house. I tried to stay busy. I cooked, cleaned, organized closets I hadn't touched in years. I took long walks around the block, hoping the fresh air would scrape the guilt from under my skin. But nothing worked. Every step, every breath carried that memory like a bruise I couldn't stop poking. At night, he texted me. Always just after my husband fell asleep, like he somehow knew the exact moment the house went still. "Are you alone?" he wrote. I left the message unanswered, but I didn't delete it. A few days later, he called while I was standing in the kitchen washing dishes. The kids were upstairs doing homework. My husband was working late. The ring cut through the quiet so sharply, I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. I picked up. I don't know why. "Please," he said, not even waiting for me to speak. "I need to see you. I can't think about anything else." "You can't do this," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder even though the kitchen was empty. "You don't mean that," he said, voice rough. "You don't know what I mean," I snapped, but the words felt weak, hollow. "I know you want me," he said softly. "I felt it. You didn't pull away." I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding so loud I thought I might throw up. I pressed my hands to the counter, breathing hard, fighting the heat curling low in my stomach. I tried to ignore him after that. I turned off my phone at night. I let the messages pile up unread. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him in the car, the way he'd looked at me like he'd break if I said no, the way his hands had trembled when he held my waist. One afternoon, he showed up at the grocery store. I was pushing the cart through the cereal aisle when I heard his voice behind me. "You look tired," he said softly. I jumped, nearly knocking a box of cereal off the shelf. I turned to see him standing there, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes dark. "Leave me alone," I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "I can't," he whispered, stepping closer. I felt the heat of him before he even touched me, the faint scent of sweat and soap that made my chest tighten. "Go home," I whispered. "You're all I think about," he said. "All the time. I can't stop." I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the cart handle so tight my knuckles went white. "Stop it," I breathed. "Someone will see." "Then come with me," he said, his voice breaking. "Please." I pushed past him, my whole body trembling, the cart rattling against the linoleum floor. I didn't look back. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the laundry room with my arms wrapped around my knees, staring at the humming dryer, rocking back and forth. My phone buzzed on the shelf beside me. "I need you," he wrote. I buried my face in my arms, whispering to myself that I wouldn't answer, that I wouldn't let this happen again. But the heat under my skin never faded. It throbbed there, pulsing with every beat of my heart, demanding something I couldn't admit out loud. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of night that clung to your skin thick with the lingering heat of the day. My husband was working late again, said he'd be home past midnight. The kids were at a sleepover down the street, the house empty and silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. He texted me just after dark. "I'm outside," he wrote. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Through the slit in the blinds, I saw his car idling at the curb, headlights off the glow of his phone, lighting up his face. I should have stayed inside. I should have locked the doors shut, off the lights, gone to bed. But I opened the door anyway, stepping out onto the porch in my bare feet. The air smelled like cut grass, and the faint metallic bite of the streetlight buzzing overhead. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, arms pinned tight to my sides. "I just need to see you," he said, climbing out of the car. His voice was rough, almost raw. "You need to leave," I whispered. "Tell me you don't want me," he said, taking another step. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. "Get in," he murmured, nodding toward the car. I don't know why I moved. I don't know why my legs carried me down the steps across the lawn, into the passenger seat of his car. My breath came shallow, chest tight, as he closed the door behind me, sealing us in the humid dark. He shifted into drive, pulling away from the curb, with one hand still gripping my thigh, his fingers digging in, hard enough to leave bruises. We didn't speak. The radio was off the windows, up the only sound the low rumble of the engine and the soft rasp of our breath. He drove us to the old warehouse lot on the edge of town, the one where the weeds grew waist-high, through the cracks in the concrete, where no one went after dark. He put the car in park, turning to face me, his eyes searching mine in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. "I can't stop," he whispered. "Don't," I breathed, but I didn't move away. His hands were rough when they grabbed my hips, pulling me across the seat into his lap. The steering wheel dug into my back, the hard plastic cold against my spine. I whispered, "Stop," once my voice, barely a breath, but my arms stayed pinned against my sides, trembling as he fumbled with the button on my jeans. "God," he groaned, pushing into me, his whole body shuddering. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. The car rocked slightly with each thrust, the old shocks creaking under our weight. "Please," he gasped into my neck. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My breath came in ragged bursts, my legs shaking around him. Every second felt wrong. Every second felt like something I couldn't give up, even if it destroyed me. When he finished, he stayed slumped against me, panting, his hands still gripping my hips. I stayed perfectly still, arms pressed to my sides, staring out the windshield at the cracked concrete lit by the moon. Neither of us spoke. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight outside the window arms, pinned tight to my sides. My husband came in around 2, the door creaking softly. He smelled like stale office coffee and printer toner, muttering to himself as he kicked off his shoes in the dark. I kept my eyes shut, breathing slow and even. He slid under the covers beside me and let out a long sigh, shifting around until his breathing settled into a steady rhythm. I could feel the warmth of his body radiating against my back, the safe, familiar weight of the blankets pressing into my shoulders. And under all that comfort, the guilt pulsed like an infected wound. In the morning, I moved through the house in a haze. I made coffee, scrambled eggs, packed the kids' lunches, while they argued about whose turn it was to feed the dog. My daughter asked me if I was okay. I lied, smiling, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "I'm fine, baby," I whispered. I was anything but fine. Every quiet moment felt like it stretched on forever. I kept remembering the feel of his hands gripping my hips in the car, the way he'd said my name, voice cracking like he was confessing something he couldn't hold inside anymore. I cleaned the kitchen twice that morning, even though it was already spotless. My hands scrubbed the same counter over and over, until the skin on my knuckles turned raw. I wanted to believe it had been the last time. I wanted to tell myself I would never let it happen again. But the truth was, part of me wanted him to text, to call, to say he couldn't stop thinking about me, that he needed me like he needed air. At noon, he did. "I can't get you out of my head," his message read. I deleted it, my thumb hovering over the screen, breath caught in my throat. I hated myself for wanting more. That afternoon, I drove to the grocery store just to get out of the house. I wandered the aisles aimlessly, tossing things in the cart I didn't need. I felt like I was floating above my body, watching someone else push the cart, someone else smile politely at the cashier, someone else drive home with the trunk full of things I would put away and never touch again. When I pulled into the driveway, my husband's car wasn't there yet. I sat in the front seat with my hands on the wheel, staring at the house, feeling the walls pressing in on me, even from here. I hated the woman I was becoming, hated the way I was lying so easily to the people who loved me. I carried the groceries inside, put them away, wiped down the counters again. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table. I didn't want to look, but I did. "Can I see you?" he'd written. I didn't answer. I set the phone face down on the table, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes, so hard I saw stars. That night, when my husband came home, he brought takeout for dinner. He kissed my cheek, told me I looked tired. I smiled, lying, telling him I was just worn out from errands. After dinner, he helped the kids with homework while I cleaned the kitchen. I stood at the sink scrubbing the same plate over and over until my arms ached, the sound of their voices behind me blending into a dull buzz I couldn't really hear. Later, after the kids were asleep, he reached for me in the dark, his hands soft and warm on my waist. I froze. "Not tonight," I whispered, turning away. He let out a soft sigh, his breath warm against the back of my neck. "I miss you," he whispered. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. "I'm just tired," I lied. I lay there in the dark, staring at the wall, listening to him breathe beside me. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. I didn't look, but my body went hot all over my stomach, twisting with need and guilt, so tangled I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I don't know if I want to stop, or if I just want to stop hating myself for not. A few days later, I was standing in the kitchen peeling potatoes when my husband came home early. I didn't hear the door at first, didn't notice the soft thump of his briefcase hitting the floor. His voice snapped me out of my trance, sharp and too close. "Who were you just talking to?" he asked. I jumped so hard the knife slipped in my hand, the blade nicking my thumb. I dropped it into the sink, clutching my bleeding hand against my chest. No one," I stammered, but the phone still glowed on the counter beside me, his name on the screen in bold letters. My husband's eyes darted to the phone. He grabbed a dish towel and pressed it into my hand, staring at me like he could see straight through my skin. "You've been off lately," he said, voice quiet. "I've just been tired," I whispered, refusing to look at him. "That's not it," he said. "You think I don't see you flinch when I touch you, the way you jump when your phone buzzes." My throat closed up. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "Is there someone else?" he asked. I shook my head frantically, feeling the tears spill down my cheeks. "No," I whispered. "I swear there isn't." But even as I said it, my phone buzzed again. His eyes flicked down to the counter jaw tightening. "Don't lie to me," he hissed. I choked on a sob, pulling my hand away from his grip. "I'm not," I whispered, backing away. He slammed his fist into the counter so hard, the coffee mugs rattled in the cabinet. "I'm not an idiot," he spat, voice shaking. He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, the door to the garage slamming behind him. I sank to the floor, pressing the towel to my bleeding hand, shaking so hard I couldn't catch my breath. The phone buzzed again. "I'm outside," the message read. I didn't think. I didn't care. I grabbed my keys, clutching the towel around my thumb, and ran out the back door, slipping into his truck before I could change my mind. He pulled me into his arms the second the door closed, his mouth hot on mine, his hands cradling my face like I was something fragile he couldn't bear to lose. "I'm not letting you go," he breathed. "Don't," I whispered, but I didn't push him away. He kissed me again, harder this time, his breath ragged. "He doesn't know you," he said. "Not like I do. He doesn't make you feel alive." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I loved my husband, that I didn't want this, but the words died in my throat. He drove us to the old dirt road behind the feed store, the truck bouncing over the ruts, weeds brushing against the windows. He parked and turned off the engine, staring at me like he was waiting for me to run. I didn't. He climbed over the console, pulling me into his lap, kissing me so hard, my lips bruised. I let him. My arms stayed pressed tight to my sides, at first trembling, but when he groaned into my mouth, I melted, wrapping them around his neck, pulling him closer. "I need you," he whispered, voice breaking. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead to his. I've lived with guilt before, but not like this. Not when it tasted like comfort. Not when it made me feel more alive than I had in years.